We're looking at Quality 15 in Playbook for Progressives. This is relentless, won't take no for an answer. In this chapter, Mann talks about analyzing rejection or difficult situation and building for yes. Many struggles aren't won the first time, and he talks about how leaders have to understand that a lot of times it's fight, fail, and fight again. If the organizations and organizers are relentless and sustain themselves, they can fight for another day. We are still fighting, as he points out, against many different powerful forces. And the one that he talks about at length in this one has to do with the nuclear energy industry. And he gives an example of Native American reservations and Margene Bull Creek in particular, who worked against the dumping of nuclear waste in the small Mescalero Apache reservation in Arizona, that the nuclear energy industry, the U.S. nuclear waste negotiator, was trying to direct the nuclear waste to. So I just talked to a number of tribal folks who were still dealing with these same issues, and I had the chance to go to Yucca Mountain a number of years ago and camp out when people were en masse organizing against the dumping of nuclear waste in Yucca Mountain because of its unknown, because of what's known about it, that it's very powerful and lasts a long time, and leaks, and the unknown too, that we are still trying to find out of how to deal with it safely, or if there's any way at all. So, but Mann talks about how it wasn't just a question of fighting the industry or dealing with the government at that time, but even within the tribe. On page 172, he discusses how one of the opponents was Leon Bear, who had led the tribal council during the 1980s and 90s and had allowed a lot of environmentally negative impacts to occur, and then to use this as an excuse to say, well, we can't go green anyway, we might as well just keep taking waste and get money for it. So this is a discussion of the struggle that took place and how people did not take no for an answer, and Margene Bullrush is one of the people who did fight for rejection of the millions of dollars that were going to come into the tribal coffers in exchange for this nuclear waste. So we're going to look at the last two chapters, Quality 16, and then we'll look at the conclusion. Fights to win, leading the great campaign. Hard times, Mann says, can lead to strong organizing. We saw that in the 40s. Sometimes it doesn't take strong, bad times. The 60s were not like the 30s, but there were conditions, especially the Vietnam War and the growth of the civil rights movement, that allowed social movements to grow. But he's pointing out that you have to not give up and say the times are bad now, so there's no hope in trying to organize. The example that he gives of the contemporary struggle is the Domestic Workers United, and how they reached out to allies. They brought Caribbean, Latino, and Asian domestic workers together. And I had the chance to meet Ajahn Poo and hear her speak. She's extremely eloquent. You can look at her. I look her up on YouTube or the web and hear her talking about how domestic workers really need a Bill of Rights and to have basic, wage structures. They were omitted from the Wagner Act of 1935, as were farm workers. So they built coalitions, they built organizations of children as well as of domestic workers across nationality. They worked with religious organizations, and they have passed a Bill of Rights, a bill in several states that they're still working on them too. So it's amazing. This is, a group of people who prior to this had no legal rights to fight for, the basics, or to organize, no protection to organize. And still they've got the courage to do this. And they have done this by building this large movement of previously unorganized workers to challenge employers. And this is New York, to win a statewide labor bill. They went on to have a campaign across the country. So there is a bill, I think, in the Assembly right now in California as well. Finally, the conclusion is the time for organizing is now, and Mann's point in this chapter is about, if you're trying to organize, think about finding an organization that you like, that hopefully has a national and international focus. He talks about the DREAM Act and how this was another emerging movement in the 1990s and 2000s, and how strong it's become. He also discusses, some historical organizing against the civil rights and against Jim Crow in the South. He talks about internationally how people are fighting in Pakistan to deal with hurricanes that are similar to what we saw in New Orleans, or even worse. And the hope has to do with not only knowing that people are standing up, there are some victories that we can point to, but also seeing that Obama won the election, that people are fighting for immigrant rights, that people could come together to re-elect Obama, to fight the Tea Party. There are many social movements that have multiplied around campaigns for arable land, clean and free water, food security, and self-determination from U.S. transnational corporations and the military. So this is a time to find an organization, to see where you are, where do you live, where do you work, what does your neighborhood need. Understand your life from an organizer's perspective, he says, and act in a way that makes sense in your life, and do things that you care about, and find an organization that you can work with. So these are Mann's ideas about organizing, and I think that the last 3 times we've discussed these, we've really found ways to understand our own roles as organizers. I'm going to turn now to a discussion of our next reading, and what I'm going to do is stop this lecture, and I'll put that into our third tape.